Optimize every day, where we look to improve ourselves 1% daily. So yesterday we talked about does there have to be poor people? And while we had a very lively discussion,
a big conversation about it,
we didn't come to what I would consider a conclusion to it, but we're not ready to come to a conclusion on that yet.
Not yet.
Today we want to talk about the naysayers. It is a related topic and something that is an important topic. As you well know,
big time.
naysayers can bring you down.
Yeah.
I think after we talked, you had a couple of really good examples. I don't remember what those were.
I don't remember what they were, but my part on this today, I will say, first thing I want to say is we talked about, are there poor people, should there be, or is there a place or for poor people like in society? Is this a thing we have to have? But I will say this, most of the time I've run into a naysayer, they were naysayers because they were poor performers. They're the types of people, and this is most everybody, so don't feel bad if you're one of these people, but they're the types of people that, like I say, you're going to hang glide off the cliff because you see the value in something, that you have faith in what's going to go on. They can't see it. They're scared of what you're doing. They would never do what you do. It's similar to someone who gets triggered, right? A lot of people these days get triggered, and they get triggered. What triggers people is when they see other people doing something they would never do. Well, why would you do that? Because internally, they would never do it. So why are you doing it? So when you do something even great, it doesn't have to be something bad. When you do something great, like you're trying to conquer the world in a new way, they'll look at you like you're crazy and think that you're, and try to and doubt you and tell you not to do it.
On the other hand, if you reach a certain level of success, then they want to tout that they knew you.
Yeah, I knew you then. Yeah, I tried to.
They try and profit off of
Yeah.
the knowledge of knowing you.
Yeah.
When
they weren't behind you the whole time.
When they weren't behind you the whole time.
Exactly.
Elon Musk being one of those examples where, he had naysayers, and all of a sudden everything he did was just turning dirt into gold. And, he didn't set out to be an alchemist, but, he essentially did that. He sold his first company for millions of dollars, and then went and created other success stories. And once he created that first success story, it just allowed him to continue building more success stories because people wanted to be behind those success stories. Whereas before becoming a success, everybody's like, you can't do it. You can't do it.
Yeah.
And that is very common in life. You'll have very few cheerleaders for what you're doing. So when you find a cheerleader, if you can find a cheerleader, most of those cheerleaders are going to be like your mom and pop, and maybe your brother and sister, and maybe not even them. But again, once you make it, then they're wanting to benefit off your success a lot of times. Not everybody's family is that way, but, I've heard of more than one where that has been the case. There's example after example, and I don't want to go in too deep into other people because that's not what we're here for.
Yeah.
We're really looking at how do we get our 1% improvement daily. And one of the things that we have to do is we have to figure out a way to ignore the naysayers, allow the positive thoughts from others to come forward, and then use the criticism that is coming that's neither a naysay nor a positive, and see how we can leverage that for our benefit. That's a hard thing to do.
It is, and I think that going back to something you said, I was thinking that for most of us, and usually it's throughout the history of the world, it's been a man would go out and try to conquer something in the world, make the best of himself in his life, and he would have a built-in cheerleader or this person used to be called a helpmate. It's a wife, but and this really strengthened men to have somebody behind them and on their side that was kind of going the same direction. It could help them and assist them to get to where they're going.
Well, there is that saying, the greatest men have a woman behind them.
Right. Behind every great man's a great woman.
Yep.
And that's
very true.
It's true.
You see,
this is
FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt.
It's a scientific fact, a biological fact. They knew this back in biblical days.
Abe Lincoln and his wife, and you got George and Martha Washington. All of those are similar type stories, where the wife didn't have this huge impact, except that she was the internal cheerleader. She was the person who made things possible. And in some cases, some women are actually smarter than their husbands.
That's right.
And they really tell their husbands how to run their damn businesses.
Exactly. Women
and
have
without
a different type of leadership.
Them, they would have failed.
That's right. Women are money focused too. So if you're if you want your business to make money, you might want to consult her on that, because she's going to tell you right how to get to the money, right? That's her main concern usually. And you're right. There's a chemistry between men and women where the woman simply adds an energy to a man and makes him perform at his highest levels when she is right for him and she's giving to him and she's giving of her knowledge and self and everything she has to give to him. It really empowers him.
It's even when with President Trump, his first wife, what's her name?
He had a few of them.
He had a few, but his first wife, she really stuck by him for years. And, when he finally divorced her, that was really, as far as his empire is concerned, that was a sad day. Because it's very obvious that she was much smarter than Donald Trump. And then he had his second wife who was, all she wanted was money.
Right.
And
purchase.
And then he went on to his current wife, Melania, and she's a bright cookie too. She's a very astute, intelligent woman. And while it seems like she doesn't have any input or say in what he does, I'm certain that she does. Because she is raising a kid that has certain difficulties that under ordinary circumstances an ordinary person would have great difficulty with, and she's dealing with it with grace and charm. She doesn't have a nanny and housekeeper like Harris's husband. And his first wife, knocking up the nanny. But that's another story.
Yeah, that's
we're not looking at that
story.
We're not looking at that story. But in this area, how do we migrate from the naysayer so that we make that 1% improvement when there's so much negative out there pressing on us?
You have to follow, I believe, you have to follow what you feel internally. You can call it your gut, you can call it your purpose. That is the thing. When your siblings might say no, a lot of people, everybody in your life might say no. But there's a calling that's within you. And the day you learn to trust it and you just go and you don't care where it puts you, it might put you out of it. You might overinvest in it, right? You might lose people in your life over it, friends, family. But like you said earlier, when you get there, then everybody will claim they had a part in it or something. Well, yeah, you did. You motivated me to keep following this thing. So to me, it's just what you have to do with all the naysayers is, like you said earlier, ignore them. In my life, I've had to cut them off. A lot of people I just had to cut clean off because if you're
they,
not,
they become toxic.
it's toxic for your mission, because if they're not part of the process of your progress, they're just holding you back. If you're not here to help the process of my progress, I don't. What can I? You're just weight. You're dead weight. You're dead weight.
So let's pivot just a little bit, because you've got a lot of people who are very successful, and they've been able to overcome the naysayer. You can't do this. You can't do that.
Right.
And yet they have failed, and they failed big time. And then they've had to convince people that they're worth the risk again, and do it over and over, even though in some cases, perfect example, I have a friend who, he was in a real estate group with 63 other people.
Okay.
And they bought strip malls across the whole United States.
Yeah, you were telling me about this before.
They had hundreds of them. And one person in their group basically screwed the rest. That one person caused them to make a bad investment. The bad investment in and of itself was not a big deal. But the economy turned just as that bad investment was made. And the economy, in line with that bad investment, ended up costing my friend, personally, $63 million. Of which he didn't have $63 million. He had to go and declare bankruptcy. That guy's worth about $20 million now. Again, he went from being worth well over $100 million to being worth nothing. That company was worth billions of dollars. And it just tumbled and went belly up.
Right.
And turning around and making a turnabout story. Everybody loves an underdog, they say. But when you have investors who are very risk averse, they're hard to sit there and say, yeah, I'm gonna sit there and invest in you because you lost $100 million. They don't want to do that.
No, that's not the reason.
They feel like you're gonna do it again. So it takes a lot of ability to build trust with people and gain that ability to turn and make that turnaround story.
Yeah, I think like what you're saying, those guys that are like that lose so much, and what I've noticed about those types of people, they always make a comeback.
Yeah, they're very resilient,
because the money doesn't make them. What we tend to forget is that these are the type of people that know how to make money. So they can go broke today, and you'll look at them a year or so from now. I remember even the Jeff Bezos divorce. Oh my gosh, it almost ruined the American economy. It was so much money. They had to be careful how they divided it, what they did with this divorce. And he loses half of his fortune. And within the next year or so, he gains it back plus more. Over $100 billion. That is insane. But when you know how to get the money, you have the means to make the money. So it's not the money making these people, because they have money, they're this person. No, this is a person who knows how to make money. And but then again, like we talked about yesterday, go ahead.
And again, you have that trust factor. And so a lot of people want to get behind the success story. Once you have the success story, it's easy to continue the success story.
Yeah, you can easy to bet on a winner.
It's the idea of success breeds success.
That's right.
And there's also those who think that failure breeds failure. Well, a lot of these people that are uber wealthy, they didn't come from, a lot of them didn't come from super wealthy means. Yeah, some of them came from families that were millionaires, and they got a hand up from parents and family members. but that didn't make them a success. That was a stepping stool to their success. And it's easy for the average person to go, well, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, so he was given success. Well, that's not always true.
No,
in fact, it's rarely.
It's never true, because if, say, you inherit $100 million, right? You're not successful. That is not called success. So even if you inherit a mass amount of riches, you're not successful because you didn't succeed at doing anything.
Right.
Right.
You're
it's
kind of
successful.
like the winning the lottery.
Yeah.
80%.
You successfully got lucky if you won a lottery.
Yeah, but 80% of people who win the lottery go bankrupt within 7 years.
Because they're poor. The lottery is literally a tax on the poor. Most
Yes,
people
it
who
is.
play are poor.
Yep.
If you're wealthy, you probably don't play it. And like I say, you get that money. What makes you success is when you succeed at something. That's what success is. So succeeding. And
Picking numbers isn't a success unless you're using string theory.
You succeeded at gambling and getting lucky. Okay, you're a genius, right? Like, what does that mean? I think it's, we know it's the lotto setup is a tax on the poor, and some poor people, like I talked about yesterday, come from very rich families, but they're poor thinkers, they're poor performers, can get $100 million in inheritance and lose it within one generation. When somebody else who's a high performer gets that $100 million and turns it into $2 billion, right? And so this is how that works, and
it also has to do with financial literacy as well. But just because you've been taught financial literacy doesn't mean you got it.
Yeah, I think people at that level they can not be financially literate. They can actually pay people to do it for them, But people that are coming from ground up, they have to be frugal about the dollar to dollars go.
My wife worked for somebody in Virginia who her grandfather built a company, and it was worth close to $100 million. And her inheritance for that business was $40 million in cash, plus she got another $60 million in property. And her siblings got the exact same thing. She had siblings who they went through the $40 million in cash, and then they went to her and said, hey, can I borrow money from you? And she said no. Then her grandfather came to her and said, hey, I have this business idea. Can you loan me $20 million? And she went, well, I can. I have it. I need to know more. And he went, okay. Says, we'll set up a meeting, but I've got to raise more money than that. So then he went to other of her siblings, and they outright said no. Some of them said no because they didn't have the cash anymore. They'd spent it all, so they had nothing to give. And then he came back to those that said yes, and there was only two. And they provided him with $40 million in cash. And then he says, I need more than that. Can we sell X, Y, and Z property? And he knew exactly what properties that needed to be sold. He says, we'll sell them on a contract where we have the option to buy back after so much time, and we'll set a price in advance as to what we'll buy the properties back for, and they need to agree to that price. And a time limit to buy it under that price, obviously. So he gave it a 5-year time limit to buy the properties back. So after the first year, almost all the cash was gone from the $40 million, but the project was on track. So at that point, then the building's officially sold. So now they had 4 years on that contract to get the project finished and completed. So he gets into year 4 of the contract, which means he's got 1 year left, and it's at like 95% complete. And the value of the project at that point was not quite where they needed it to be, but they're 5% away, and 1 year basically to get it completed. They got the project finished about 4 months ahead of when it was planned to be done, and the project was worth $70 million more than what was anticipated. So he was able to sell that project, pay back the 2 siblings that had loaned $40 million in cash, plus buy back the buildings and give them an additional $30 million apiece. And the grandfather kept like $10 or $12 million to himself as well. But he had a series of successes throughout his life that allowed certain individuals in the family to say yes. Greed prevented others from saying yes. And at the end of the day, by the time that project was completed, most of her siblings had gone bankrupt. And they had been given enough money in their trust fund that they could have easily lived on that money for the rest of their life had they decided to just buy a modest house and just live on the monthly payments that the trust would pay out if they didn't pull anything from it. Because they had the right to pull from the trust fund any amount they wanted, above and beyond what the minimum payment would be. But whenever they could pull out a lump sum, it decreases the amount that you can get on a monthly payment basis. So they basically drove themselves into the ground, and they had been taught financial literacy. So you can understand here that just because you've been taught doesn't mean that everybody listens. Or maybe they just didn't understand. I don't know what it is.
Or life circumstances made them, like you say, the naysayers, the people, they got people in their ear. It rocks them, takes them off the course of what they should be doing. There's so many pitfalls to success. There are so many pitfalls to success. And that is why I've learned in my years that the one thing I stick to is I don't care where it puts me. I don't care how far back it sets me, because you got to get down to get up. Nobody's dunking a basketball. Well, very few people in the world can dunk a basketball without bending your knees. You got to get down to get that exposure enough. And sometimes it takes a consolidation of getting small in order to get big. And sometimes that means chopping people away.
And sometimes you have to be a toddler and learn how to say no.
Yeah. No.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But you also have to know when to say yes.
Yeah, you gotta say yes to progress. I mean, I think it always feels like that. And it's always a gamble. Every move we make is a gamble. Everything doesn't work. You think something works and you take that setback, that failure, and then the next thing works. And so it's a...
So now we've discussed all of this. I know that you've had some failures in the last few days again.
Yeah. Well, kind of.
But I think
I'd say some miscalculations.
That could be too.
Yeah, and it calls for a time lapse. Yeah.
I know I've had a miscalculation. I thought that something would make something better, and it didn't have the desired outcome. I got a desired outcome, but then the desired outcome from that desired outcome didn't come to fruition.
It wasn't
It wasn't quite what I expected.
Yeah.
So now it's a recalibration. It's, I learned something, and now I just have to recalibrate from there and, do things just a little bit. It's not a major change. It's just a little, it's a step up.
Yeah, you had to change the system a little bit. And like for me, what I ran into took 2 days out of my schedule that I did not plan 48 hours to be lost to this project, but I was working on something that I considered to be very simple, something I had done so many times before, for years actually. And when I ran into this one, it just took. I was shocked that it started to take all day. Then it took 24 hours, and I wake up the next day like that was crazy.
It was a situation in my mind.
My goodness,
it was a situation where you got so invested in it that you didn't take a step back.
It was hard. Yeah, it was hard to take a step back.
And you didn't take a step back. I saw you sitting there toiling at
for
this task.
endless
hours. You were toiling.
All hours on end.
You should have taken a step back. And
yep, that's
there was
exactly
a
right.
couple of times where I hinted about taking a step back.
Yeah,
but you were so
I couldn't hear
involved, you couldn't take that hint.
Because I was baffled. I was amazed at how this was going. Right? It's like, but see, it happens in sports, and you'll get your ass really kicked, right? But in sports, there's a time limit to the game. But when we're out here doing it in business or for yourself, there's no time limit. You'll wake up, work on it, and be on it all day till you go to sleep, and then you wake up the next day, be on the same thing. There's no end of that game.
It's kind of like when during World War II, when Kennedy was out on his PT boat, and he was sitting there patrolling in the Pacific, and to prevent from getting shot by the Japanese, he didn't turn on his motors on his PT Cruiser, which is 3 Packard engines in a plywood boat. And he ended up getting run over by a cruiser and smashing the boat.
Wow.
And then they had to use the life preservers and the life rafts that were on the boat just to float out until they got to some place, so that they weren't heard or seen, and a little, plywood boat getting run over by a cruiser, they wouldn't hear it. They wouldn't even feel it.
Not at all.
It was a miscalculation that led to a problem, but the problem got solved in a different manner, although the boat sank to the bottom of the ocean, and which meant that, they had to come up with, but that's an old story, and it was one of the things that made Kennedy who he was. Like or hate his politics, there were things that Kennedy did that were positive.
Yeah, both
and
ways.
Led him to be a success.
Yeah, he really, it has me still divided. I mean, it's like 50-50. 50% great policy, 50% horrible policy. It was weird with Kennedy.
Yeah, there were a lot of things that he did that are detrimental to our policies today. And some of the things that he did that are very positive to our policies today.
Yeah, some of the things that he stood for to protect us actually probably could have even got him hurt. So
yeah,
maybe a hero at the end.
So thinking about your 1%, how has that been going, and what things do you think?
I'll tell you what, I am struggling with that on a day like today because I'm stagnant. After 2 days of that grinding like that, it wore me out. I wore myself out. So then there comes, I think we forget to
You were sleeping in the office.
Yeah, we forget to include the day of rest. Because after going through that, it's like I'm burnt, you get burnt out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I really burnt myself out trying to get that done because I wanted to complete this whole project so much, and that was kind of a finishing touch, a very important finishing touch. That's why it was so grueling. But so today I've been a little burnt up. Not really. I feel my energy down most of the day. I don't really have that. Let's go. And so I don't know. Today's 1% probably would be like I think you had a few days ago, where you just needed a little rest. It's kind of more relaxed for me today. Although I'm still working all day, I'm just not trying to think too much because I burn my brain up. Literally, I think too much. I really overthink the steps, and that's why you were saying maybe step back, because you stop thinking for a minute and cool your brain down. I think I had smoke coming out my ears. So,
I saw it coming up.
yeah, it was steaming.
It was steaming. Oof. It wasn't like
Yeah, it was.
It was just
a light smoke, like it was incense.
But I can definitely see where those hindrances have slowed you down. But I think that you actually have made some progress on the 1%, even though, kind of like me, I didn't feel like I made very much. But it turns out that, when I took the rest and did what I needed, suddenly that led to other successes. I know today I had some big successes. I found some resources that I didn't know existed.
Yeah, you were investigating it. I forgot. Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of research today,
and that new knowledge got you lit up, doesn't it?
Oh, geez, it's so exciting when you find new things that are going to be a big benefit to you. That doesn't mean that it's a success yet, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
I mean, when you get that type of knowledge and information, it's like it makes you feel more powerful, like you really can do it, because it's added weapons to your arsenal. It's like, now I have this weapon.
And even with all of that, I still have naysayers that are like dragging me down, and then you've got the people who are sending out all this spam email. I can help you do this, and I can help you do that. And, when you start reading into what they're doing, you go, well, is this real or is this scam?
Well, it's not spam, it's scam. That's exactly what it is.
And, that is really hard to deal with sometimes, that you have stuff that is essentially scam.
Yeah, everything today is.
And they're not charging a little money for a scam. They're wanting thousands of dollars.
They need to scam to pay off.
Well, I guess, they're trying to scam so many people, and there's so few takers.
Yeah.
That
you got to get paid
once
when it
they
happens.
Find the one taker, then they get their payday.
Yeah.
But anyway, the last week was truly a success.
It was great.
I would say I saw at least a 7% improvement over the entire week.
Yeah, I definitely did.
I don't think
I saw you go through that. I mean, I think you're being greedy. You're feeling like you're not getting enough out of it yet, but I think you are. I think it's the right track. But I think the seeds for you were planted last week. It was planting a lot of seeds, and you're like, man, nothing's growing yet and blossoming and blooming here, but I think that's coming because you're planting the right seeds.
I needed the rainstorm.
You need the rain and you need the sun to shine a little bit, but once you go through that process, you'll see what the seeds you've been planting like last week. So I think that's what you're waiting on. For me, I was able to, with what I'm working on, I'm able to plant a seed in the morning and see it bloom by the evening, right? So I can feel success by the end of the day. With what you're working on, successes are in longer increments.
Oh yeah,
right.
Success is like weeks or months
months, and some major parts are years. 2-3 years.
And I've got so many pressures on me coming from so many different places. So I have my cheerleaders, I have my naysayers, and I'm trying to cancel out the naysayers while listening to the cheerleaders and trying to make the best of the situation. And honestly, like I was saying, I think I got more than my 7% improvement.
Yeah, you definitely did last week.
I don't know that I would say that it was 1% every day. But, one day it was 0.5%, and the next day it was 2%, and the next day it was 0.25%, and the next day it was 1.5%.
Yeah, there's a fluctuation.
But it was like this going throughout the week, and it was just an upward trend. So we'll keep working on this.
Yeah, I want to say one thing for the viewers before we sign out here is there is a difference. And very important for you guys to recognize, and that we have to recognize, the difference between the naysayers and those who are playing devil's advocate, right? The naysayers will tell you that you can't do, shouldn't do, right? The devil's advocate's gonna say, what about this scenario? Now, the naysayer, they're operating in fear usually, and fear is not going to win. So stay away from them, cut them off. But the devil's advocate is actually checking your plan.
Them damn lawyers.
To make sure you can win, right? They want to
Them
make
damn
sure.
lawyers.
Yeah. The devil's advocate wants to make sure you can win. So good to
Yeah.
have devil's advocates around you for your plans. I like having that, people that say, well, what if this happens? And then I'll be able to respond correctly. And if I'm not able to respond to the devil's advocate correctly, that means my plan isn't in full. So I like having those types of people around. They kind of check my plans, ask me questions, question me on my thoughts. That's cool. But the naysayers, they gotta go, dog. Get them out your face.
Yep. So,
at least for a while.
So again, like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll get back to you.
Sub like a man.
And we will see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.